Hi, I'm Natasha.
And I'm Cassandra.
And this is Strange Sisters. And today Cassandra's doing some kind of case. She told me what it was and I totally forgot. So I'm just gonna let her take over from here.
So I'm going to talk to you guys about how haunted Alcatraz is.
Right.
So I'm probably going to skip over a lot about what everybody pretty much knows about Alcatraz and talk a little more about the ghosties.
Okay. Sounds good.
So as I'm sure many of you know, recently Trump has played around with the idea of reopening Alcatraz, one of the most infamous prisons in the United States.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense because it's in such poor condition from what I understand. Like it's really not operable. It would have to take a lot of work to get it up and running again.
So the next thing I have is why, one may ask.
Oh, okay.
Well, here are some quotes from the time. Quoting his reason to reopen a substantially enlarged and rebuilt prison on Alcatraz Island being in order to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. He also said, "It's just an idea I've had to counter the radicalized judges that want to have trials for every single person that's in our country illegally." So he made a turn there.
Okay, yeah, just think of it, the Constitution. That's like one of our rights as people in America.
I think it's very interesting that he said that's in our country illegally. So it's not just that he wants to have a prison for like the worst of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
He's very specific about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times with those types of things, like that's how it starts. And then it's people that disagree with him. It's a very slippery slope.
Definitely. He also said, where was it? Alcatraz is a symbol of law and order. Yes, it does have quite a history.
People still escaped from there, so it's not like it's foolproof.
There were 14, I think the number is 14 escape attempts, but I don't think that anybody actually survived and was found escaping it.
Well, I think there was a few people that were just never found, so they don't know if
That's
they
what I
actually
mean.
survived. Yeah.
Couldn't be me.
I mean, if you have a boat come and pick you up.
That's true. I was thinking swimming.
No, I mean, some people do swim those distances, so like I guess that's possible, but you could also just have a boat come pick you up at a certain point.
But how would you communicate that to the outside world? To like have somebody pick you up on a boat?
They find ways. People in prison get like really creative with communication and how they talk to people. So I don't know. I wouldn't totally rule it out personally.
That's fair. So now a younger and more naive Cassandra would think that this is a ridiculous notion. And while I still believe that it is, I now know that two things can be true at once. So it is ridiculous, but it actually has a possibility of happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a lot of money to put into something like that. Like, I wonder if there's not already a facility that's more modern that, not that I agree with what he's doing, but it seems like a waste of money in addition to being, human rights violation.
One article I read and something that I agree with is that it's kind of a pissing contest. Like he just wants to do it to prove that he could do it because he thinks it's cool.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much.
Even experts are stating if you do, you realize all practical problems and holes in the reasoning and how if we actually do these things, it will just make us worse off. Reopening Alcatraz is like that. It would be much safer for Americans and punitive toward criminals to use our current prison system than to reopen a tourist attraction.
Yeah, it's literally like people go and like tour it.
I think it's a state park now.
Yeah, I think it is a state park, which is pretty cool. Maybe I should try to go check it out before it turns back into a prison, I guess.
I'll have to come visit you before that happens. We'll go together.
Yeah, I don't really like boat rides, but I guess I'll make an exception for this.
So, at the risk of becoming far too political on all of this headline stating the possibility of reopening Alcatraz brought me back to many of my favorite early 2000s ghost shows. Mm-hmm. I am a huge fan of ghost hunters. I have feelings about ghost adventures, but I'm a big fan of ghost hunters. And I'm pretty sure all of them went there.
Yeah, that was like the quintessential, one of the biggest spots you would go to.
Yeah, that and like the Winchester House.
Yeah, the Winchester House. Yeah, definitely. I feel like there's a few others too that every show goes to.
There's definitely a couple asylums.
Mm-hmm. Like Rolling Hills Asylum.
I think Penhurst Asylum.
Yeah, Rolling Hills Asylum was actually going to be our first episode, and for whatever reason, we just couldn't get a good quality recording on that one. So I don't know. Maybe the spirits are like, it's been done already. Just leave it alone.
That was pre-video phase.
Yeah, that was when we were just trying to do audio, and we still couldn't get a good quality. So we're hoping that we can go visit it and do a tour at some point. But that would be kind of a fun thing to do around Halloween.
Oh, yeah. But let's take a step back with how incredibly stressful today's political climate is. And we'll ignore the repercussions of reopening the prison for right now. Instead, let's talk about how spooky the island is.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, the history of Alcatraz is pretty well known, so I'm not going to go into that too much, other than to discuss the indigenous history behind it. I'm going to preface this with I am going to try so hard to pronounce things right, but please don't hate me if I don't. So, this island was a part of the Olane territories, and while the history of the island is largely based on oral history that obviously the colonizers bent over backwards to erase, what is able to be remembered is that the island was used as a place to isolate or ostracize tribe members who broke laws or social norms.
Interesting. So it's always kind of been that type of place. That's really interesting.
They believed it to be a place of evil spirits, from what I understand.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, that really adds an interesting layer to it. That's kind of cool. I mean, cool, but scary.
Yeah. Later, it was used as a place for camping or food gathering. And even later than that, it was a place that people would hide from the California mission system.
Yep, that makes sense.
So, like I said, I don't know that much about their history or their culture, and it's not my place to speak much on it, but I will try to roughly summarize the history of the land once the colonizers arrived and how it affected the indigenous people. So during the Mexican-American War of 1848, the island became a naval defense fort and would then later be used as a prison for Confederate sympathizers, as well as indigenous people who resisted the land decrees and forced mandatory education systems in 1895.
Yeah, that tracks, unfortunately. Not the Confederate sympathizers, but yeah, because they were literally taking children away from their families and putting them in these horrible schools that were,
I think schools is a big word to even call it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just really like to beat them and torture them and make them become Christian. Or, well, I guess maybe it was Catholic because it was the Spaniards at that time. Yeah.
Well, you know how good Catholic history is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sorry to pause and go on a tangent. Did you see that the new Pope is from the United States?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting choice. I don't know anything about him, but his name is not Peter, which is in that doomsday prophecy, what we had talked about. So, I wonder at all if that influenced their decision because, like I said, there were quite a few candidates that did actually have that name. So, but they also changed their name when they become Pope. So,
I was just surprised that they were from the United States, honestly. I kind of thought you had to come from Italy.
No, I mean, there have been a lot of Italian popes, obviously, but yeah, there were some other candidates that I believe were from different countries in Africa.
Okay. I saw somewhere on TikTok, so obviously take that as what it's worth, that like it was like my mom dated the Pope in high school.
Oh,
And I
that's
was like,
funny.
that's
Yeah.
unreal.
I mean, yeah, but that could happen to anyone, right? I mean, you don't know you're going to be the Pope when you're 17. So,
Yes. I feel like you would know that you were gonna try to be like a priest.
Yeah, I mean, so
how would I know?
I think not everyone goes to that right away.
Like back in the day where they would just send them there at like 16.
Yeah, same for nuns. Actually, I used to work with a nun at this human trafficking shelter, and she would say that when like young women would come, wanting to be a nun, they would kind of encourage her if she hadn't gone out and kind of like tried different things to really do that, because once you make that commitment, like you're in it for life.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Back to this, and I'm gonna try again with the pronunciation. So 1895, from 1895 to 1969, there were many protests in the attempt to have the land returned to the Moke Hape, I think. I looked it up, I watched a video and everything, I'm just bad with pronunciation. Unfortunately, these attempts were thwarted by the US government. I know, we are all shocked and surprised.
Yeah, I do remember learning something about this, that they were trying really hard to get the land returned to the indigenous people. And of course, for whatever reason, the government was like, no, you can't have this tiny little island that has really no significance to us just because we said so.
Well, from what I understand, they were trying to use a law that said that if it was the land was not used by the US government for an extended period of time, they could take it back. But when they did, they said, just kidding, you actually can't do that.
Yeah, the laws only apply when they try to use them, not when people try to use them.
So one of the most notable being the Hape 19 Hape men who refused to send their children to assimilation schools. And they would only be released with the promise that their children would not be sent to these abusive Americanizing schools. So I think they were there for about a year. And then the government went back on its word.
Of course.
Which is a really good place to start when we think about how much anger and just general sadness is on the soil of this land.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I said, it is said that they believe that the land is owned by evil spirits. So you already have like a bad vibe in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know what we should do? Add a bunch of the worst prisoners.
Yeah, right. That'll make it better.
Oh, yeah, and they're going to handle it super well. If it is the land of evil spirits, like, imagine just adding Al Capone to that.
Yeah, and so many other pretty violent offenders from what I remember.
Yes, and like I said, I'm not going to go too much into that history, but two of the most famous are Al Capone and George Kelly, or Machine Gun Kelly, not the musician.
Oh, yeah. Not to be confused. Yeah.
So let's bring it back to 1933, when Alcatraz became a maximum security federal penitentiary, largely in response to prohibition and the rising rate of bootleggers and mobsters. Like I said, Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
The prison was set up not for rehabilitation, but solely for incarceration.
Right, which I think most prisons were at that point.
Yeah, I think it took a long time for people to realize, like, hey, they're just going to do it again if you don't help them find a way not to.
Mm-hmm.
Which is tragic and so sad.
Yeah. Well, for people like Al Capone, I mean, he was part of a crime family. So that's a little bit different than someone that's like systems impacted,
That is very true.
Was forced into that type of situation. I think Al Capone had a little bit more of a choice, and maybe greed kind of got the best of him there.
Well, one of the articles I read said that some of the people who were in this prison were just being a nuisance in other prisons. It was administrative. They were being annoying to the administration, so they would just send them there so they wouldn't have to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
Which, just speaks on our prison system, but
yeah.
But the worst of the worst of being at Alcatraz would be going to the hole, or D block. D block is said to be the most haunted block in the prison, and it is completely understandable why. D block was originally made like any other cell block in the facility. However, after the 1939 escape attempt from Arthur Doc Barker, which ultimately led to his death, they revamped the block to become what it is today. In the hole, also known as the treatment unit, which treatment's a big word from what I'm about to tell you about.
Yeah.
Prisoners were put in cells with nothing but a toilet, sink, and a mattress. During a normal week in D Block, you were allowed 2 showers and rec time once. And I couldn't figure out how long they had rec time, but I would assume like an hour.
Wow. Yeah. So you're just in that room for all day, 24 hours a day, basically. Maybe you get out for 1 hour every week.
And you were completely alone. Like, obviously, the cells were next to each other, but I couldn't. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I think that's like the shoe now, right? Like the.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, other than that, you were in complete isolation. You ate your meals there, you did everything there. And the guards had no patience or kindness for those in D Block either.
Mm-hmm.
And D Block was facing the Golden Gate Bridge, which led to constant cold winds, and some particularly cruel guards would then turn the air conditioner on to torture the inmates even more.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It can get cold up there, especially in the winter.
Especially, and with the wind, and then you're going to add the air.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up.
I just have to wonder who was so cruel? Like, did these inmates do something genuinely warranting you torturing them?
I think there are definitely some people that they just are sadistic and like they want to do that job because they want to like punish people.
I just will never understand. But of the
Yeah.
42 cells on D Block, there were 6 that are specifically horrific. In 5 of these, you'd lose all your privileges. You didn't even get to have your mattress until nighttime. So you had a sink and a toilet, and you just were there.
Mm-hmm.
And these are like cement cells. So you're just sitting there on the cold ground.
Right.
But there was one, the 6th one, that was the absolute worst. And it is called the Oriental cell. And I know that sounds racist. I don't understand it either. But in the Oriental cell, you would be stripped naked and you'd lose your right to even a sink and a toilet. You did at least get a mattress each night. During the day, you did not have access to one. And so here you are, completely alone in the dark with nothing but a small hole to relieve yourself in.
Oh, like a hole in the ground?
And generally, people were only in there for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
But that is horrific.
Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So former guards claim to see most supernatural things in D Block. One guard from the 1940s claimed that guards often saw a man in full 1800s garb just strolling along the strip of cells.
That's interesting. I wonder if he was like from the military, from during the Mexican-American War.
Or one of the Confederate sympathizers.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So there's one story that goes, there was an unnamed inmate who was brought to the hole, which I don't know which cell he was in, and that will kind of matter later, because there's one specific cell that is supposed to be the worst one to be in. And it's actually not the Oriental one, I believe. I really hate saying that word.
Yeah, I know.
But once this inmate was put in a cell, he started to scream consistently, constantly for hours. And he said that there was a creature in the cell with him that had glowing red eyes. I believe this was a common occurrence because the guards did nothing. Maybe being used to this and most likely believing it to be like a hoax, seen as a ploy to get out of torment from the hole.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually the screaming stopped. An eerie silence followed. The next morning, the inmate was found dead, with handprints around his neck. Not only that, what was odder was the horrific expression that graced his face.
So I wonder if it's like a demon or some kind of earth spirit that was there before Catholicism became the picture. That's really interesting.
This creature, the Thing.
Okay.
But his death was ruled solely not to be a suicide. And of course, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, they probably didn't care all that much to do an investigation.
Some believe a guard got fed up with the man screaming and quieted the inmate once for all.
Yeah, that also makes a lot of sense.
But many also believe that it was the entity that has haunted other inmates. The Thing that has now been claimed to have been seen by prisoners and tourists alike, a creature with glowing red eyes that moans or shrieks. But could it be an entity or a lost soul or someone who passed that was incarcerated? Or could it be one of the evil spirits? Whatever it is, something else weird happened. Now, I'm not positive if it was the same day or if it was later on, but during a daily head count, there was an extra person. The guards stood in shock, looking at the end of the line where there stood an apparition of an inmate who had passed.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So it seems like maybe people or spirits or anything that's killed on that land stays there or is trapped there.
Yeah. I'm having an image of an episode of Supernatural, but I can't remember which one where like they're always stuck.
Yes, well, I know it was definitely Charmed, where they went to Alcatraz and they saw a guy and they were like talking to the ghost, and everyone was like, "What were you talking to?" You know, because they had like just killed witches or whatever. Yeah.
Was that pre or post Prue?
I think it was. Well, it wouldn't have been pre-Prue. It would have been either.
Oh yeah, no. If it was during Prue or post Prue.
Yeah, I think it was during Prue. I think it was one of the early seasons before Rose McGowan's character. Yeah.
And I definitely know there's like that whole season of Murder House of American Horror Story where you have to be on the land and then you hunt there forever.
Yeah, and the same thing for 1984.
And I think Hotel.
And Hotel and Roanoke, a lot of them.
Yeah. They really started to lose the plot.
Yeah, I liked 1984. I didn't like the double feature season. That was kind of weird. And then the latest one with Kim Kardashian kind of lost my interest. But
well, anyway. Cell Block C is only slightly better than D, giving home to the utility passageway, where it is believed that Bernard Coy, Joseph Kretzer, and Marvin Hubbard were killed in a failed escape attempt. There are reports of loud banging, clanging voices, and even apparitions of men in fatigues in this passageway. Fatigues could connect back to the military roots of the island, where it would also make sense for these men to haunt the halls that they thought they were going to find their freedom for. Unfortunately for these three men, they found the wrong kind of freedom. Were either killed or passed away. I have a feeling they were killed. And all I can think of is, like, obviously everything else is also horrible, but I can only imagine what they were feeding them.
Yeah, especially because food back then was already kind of questionable, I feel like.
And I know for the specific, I'm not going to say that word again, but the specific cell in Cell Block D, they had an even more restricted diet while they were there. I'm such a picky eater, I would lose it.
Yeah. And I have like food allergies, so I always think, like, would they even check, you know, to see if the food has my allergens in it, or would they just feed it? And then if I have a reaction, then they just deal with it. Probably the latter.
I know I've watched some TikTokers who have been in jail and talk about it. And a lot of the time, from what I understand, you just have to hope you have commissary.
Yeah, so that you can make sure you can actually see the ingredients.
So in Cell Block C, there is also a laundry room that has been said by a medium to be home to a tall, bald man with small beady eyes. This has been backed up by a former inmate, Leon Thompson, who was there during the reading and told of a man named L.B. Maldowitz, aka the Butcher, who was killed in that very laundry room. This death is confirmed by the prison records, though I couldn't find a picture of his mugshot to confirm his appearance that he was tall, bald, and had small beady eyes.
That's funny that he was called the Butcher, because literally on Roanoke there's a character called the Butcher. Yeah.
See, it all makes sense together, guys. We get back to the point.
Yeah.
Voices and screams are also heard coming from, unsurprisingly, the hospital, as well as from the mess hall. There are even rumors of hearing a banjo coming from Al Capone's cell, a hobby he had apparently taken up during his stay.
That's more of a residual haunting, right? Where she's kind of doing the same thing when they were there, and it just keeps kind of going. The energy just stays.
Yeah, they don't know that they're there.
Right.
Fun side note, I have two wonderful goddaughters, and I don't know how to handle children that well, but I was babysitting the smallest one, who was maybe a year or two old, and she was crying. I couldn't get her to sleep, so I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I was watching, obviously, Ghost Hunters, and I just started to explain to her the difference between a residual and an intelligent haunting and what all of that meant, and she did fall asleep.
What's most crazy about that story is that someone chose you to be a godmother to two children.
They are beautiful, and I love them. And I agree, but it is one of the biggest flexes in my life that I not only have a stepchild, but two godchildren. Anyway, instead of bullying me, let's talk about...
Crazy to me. But okay.
Al Capone apparently took up the banjo, which I think is so strange. Just
Yeah, I mean,
banjos in general.
you'd think guitar would maybe be a little more appealing, but okay.
Or ukulele.
I don't know if they really had ukuleles available at that point. As more of a specialty item, I guess.
So according to the Alcatraz experience, the top 3 ghosts of the island are the man in cell 14D. So remember I told you there was one cell that was the worst of all of them?
Right.
And then the lady in green, and of course, the Birdman of Alcatraz, aka Robert Stroud. The man of cell 14D is where guards hear chains, knocking sounds, and see full apparitions of what is believed to be the ghost of a violent inmate who supposedly died of natural causes. And I think, as much as we've talked about it, I think dying of natural causes doesn't happen at Alcatraz.
Yeah, I mean, or you're like beaten so badly that you have like a heart attack or something.
I don't know if that would be considered natural causes, though, because like something had to be a causation of it.
Yeah, but maybe that's just how they, record it.
But many believe that this man was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
The lady in green is just a far sadder story. Obviously, the island needed guards to run the prison. So outside of the gray walls, there was a small society of people living on the island.
Okay, yeah, because they weren't like commuting across the water every day. They just lived on the island.
Yeah. And obviously the families followed their husbands or their fathers or whatever to live there and be with them. One of those women, age 40, with brown hair and a green dress, is said to be seen in the washroom window of one of these homes, and it is believed she committed suicide.
Oh, yeah, that was sad.
And then finally, and what seems to be the only person in this list that we can give a name to, is Robert Stroud, the Birdman, which apparently is a movie that I think Nicolas Cage is in. It might be a different movie about Alcatraz, but when I see Nicolas Cage,
I thought it sounded familiar. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was in it.
you know we love Nicolas Cage on this channel.
I don't know how much we've talked that I didn't cut out, but yeah, our family has a weird obsession with Nicolas Cage.
We love Nicolas Cage. I have the weirdest blanket that is just Nicolas Cage's face zoomed in, and my small one, my stepchild, decided it was a really good idea to take it and put it over the couch. And I'm pretty sure our neighbor came over, and it was just Nicolas Cage's face on the couch.
Like, what the hell? Yeah.
So he knows me well enough to know that that's not surprising.
Yeah, that's probably one of the least weird things about you, honestly. So
I swear to God, she loves me, guys.
I mean, we really embody the whole strange sisters thing. Like, we didn't just make that up. Like, we are actually weird people.
His story is pretty well known, obviously, the Birdman. And he ended up in Alcatraz after killing a guard in the previous prison. And he's an expert in, this is just a story of me not being able to pronounce things, ornithology, or the study of birds. And he's known to be seen often by the hospital where it seems he spent a lot of his time. As I said earlier, Alcatraz has been the subject of many different ghost shows, and you can even go on a night tour to this day. So I'm not going to go on about those. However, in my research, I did find one piece of evidence that I found really interesting. An article by CBS, which was last updated on June 16th, 2024, so it was recent.
Recent, yeah.
Tells about a crew of researchers heading to Alcatraz to build a 3D map of the island in order to track erosion and the effect of climate change.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They would spend 3 weeks there, and they slept in D Block. They stayed there for 3 whole ass weeks, sharing a communal bathroom, surviving off food they brought with them. The beginning of this makes me have many thoughts and questions, but I'm going to try to narrow them down. First and foremost, being that this sounds like the beginning of a really, really, really bad and poorly thought out horror movie.
Yes, and I would rather sleep in a tent than sleep in Alcatraz. I don't know why they would do that.
Why they would pick D Block too, like that is a
Right.
choice.
Yeah, I wonder if it had to do something with like electricity or, like maybe that's where electricity is run to or something like that. But I would much rather stay in a tent. It would probably be nicer, honestly.
Well, my second thought is that this is an obvious tourist destination, which means it has staff coming to and from. And like we said, it's a park. So
Right.
why on earth would you choose to stay in an old prison with no showers or heat? And finally, considering that they had access to places in the prison that most people don't, why would you choose D Block? Like, first of all, there has to be a boat going back and forth every day. Get a hotel nearby, rent an Airbnb.
Or like just rent your own boat. I would rather sleep on the boat, and I don't even like being on boats than sleep in Alcatraz. That's just what a weird choice.
I swear I've seen an old sci-fi movie. Like back when sci-fi was still SCIFI movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, right before they changed it to SYFY.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And considering all of this, you have access to all of Alcatraz basically. Why are you in
Mm-hmm.
D Block? It could absolutely not be me. You're asking to have a bad time.
Yeah, I feel like it must have something to do with electricity because if the tour doesn't go through the whole prison, maybe those other blocks or areas that are closed off like don't have electricity, or maybe they haven't been tested for asbestos or something. So maybe that was like the safest place to stay from
Safe is a big word.
a non ghost. Yeah.
So now that I've got this tangent over with, because I just had to say they all made weird choices. What
Mm-hmm.
brought me pause is that this was obviously a trusted research group that had access to
Mm-hmm.
places that most people don't. And obviously it's a very important work. I mean, climate change is awful and everything's happening. But they even had paranormal experiences there.
Mm-hmm.
So the head researcher, Pete Kelsey, was quoted simply saying, "I do not like being in the hospital. That place give me the willies." And that's where I stopped and actually was like, this is so funny to me. I need to put this in the podcast.
Yeah, because if they're researchers, maybe they don't really believe in ghosts and stuff, so they didn't really think anything of it at first, and then yeah.
So while the group is sleeping in D Block, one of the researchers happened to snore incredibly loud. And they asked him to sleep in another room, which I have done to my husband before, but. So I guess this retired police officer who was with them was snoring really loud. So he went to go sleep in the mugshot room. In the morning, Kelsey went to go find the gentleman. He found him asleep outside the room and then told Kelsey that he would absolutely never sleep in that room again because he started to hear the sounds of crowds above him in the middle of the night.
Oh, interesting.
So this is especially interesting because there are tales of guards from the past hearing phantom noises so loud, like we talked about how this was a Navy fort, like cannons, gunshots, and riots. They were so believable and so loud. They actually thought the prisoners were rioting and they hid until the morning.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it's another maybe case of residual
Yeah.
energy. Huh.
So following that researcher's experience that night, I'm happy to tell you that he did not have to sleep there again and they just dealt with his snoring.
Yeah. Or I wonder, like, what about the places where the guards used to live? Like, are those buildings still there? I would think it would even be better to sleep there than to sleep in the actual prison.
I saw a picture of one old guardhouse that was like decapitated, sorry,
Dilapidated.
decaying.
Okay, so maybe they were not really taken care of and kind of fell apart.
So the building that I was talking about, they actually have records of experiences back from when it was still a functioning prison, where the guards and officers were having like a Christmas party, and they saw a whole apparition. This like entire group of people saw this apparition walking by,
Mm,
and
wow.
everybody just kind of stared because what do you do other than grab the salt?
They probably weren't thinking about grabbing this up. It's cool that like groups of people are seeing the apparition instead of just like one person, where people can kind of brush it off and say, "Oh, you're just tired or something." Yeah.
So those are just a few examples of the inhabitants of Alcatraz Island, and it makes you wonder if this land was already believed to be inhabited by an evil spirit and then inhabited by ostracized people, then a fort of a war, a military prison, and finally a federal penitentiary for the worst of the worst among criminals of their time, what would be the repercussions of rebuilding and reopening this place today? Especially because generally, from what I understand, ghosts really don't like when you fuck with their house.
Yeah, like if you're knocking things down or digging things up, that actually is the start of almost every horror movie out there. Probably like a good 50%. Yeah. Well, I would not suggest it.
Regardless of the political policies surrounding it, how might the spirits take it, and what crime do you have to commit to end up in cell D14 with whatever resides there?
Yeah, and what's scary too is imagine they actually didn't replace like the plumbing or anything, and so like that one cell was left with just like a hole to go to the bathroom in.
I don't know that cell 14D was the same as the
as that one that didn't have any amenities.
Amenities is such a great way to say that.
Yeah, like basic human needs. Yeah, well, let's hope that it does not happen.
It just seems like way too much.
Yeah, I could see him like boasting about, oh, I reopened Alcatraz, though, so.
I could see him renaming it Trump's Alcatraz.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
But, so everybody, you're not going to hear like the past 20 minutes of us just talking as sisters, but.
Yeah. Just chit-chatting. But yeah, that was really interesting. I didn't really know that much about Alcatraz. So yeah, I do want to go check it out just to kind of see what it's like before, if anything's going to happen to it. It'd be cool to see it before. Yeah, I assume that if it does reopen, we would not be allowed to visit it anymore at that point. So
I have a feeling that they won't reopen it because it has to make a lot of money from tourism.
Yeah, I mean, national parks make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Especially like Yosemite and, Yellowstone, the big ones make a lot of money. So yeah, who knows?
Hopefully we just generally don't have to worry about it and we'll pretend like he never said that and it didn't happen.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I feel like there's bigger things going on. Maybe this will just kind of pass at some point, it's just a crazy idea.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you guys for hanging out with us and stay strange.